Hello students. So this video is the second for the January 23rd class. In the last video we had an introduction to census data, and as part of that we went in and we downloaded some population race and ethnicity data, and we got back this sort of garbled mess, and we're going to use it as a quick introduction to some basic Excel techniques. So, point of sort of order and caveat here, this will probably be the only time in the semester we have radically different interfaces, and that's because I use Excel for Mac. So the muscle memory of what I'm telling you to do might be a little different, but highlight and hone in on the concepts and the words I'm saying, because even if tools are located in a slightly different sort of format or menu here, all the tools I talk about in this video will be in sort of your platform of Excel, and it just might take an extra second to find them. So first thing to know is what I'm actually looking at here, which is a CSV. So CSV means comma separated value. It's a good resource, but typically I like to use them if I'm loading a lot of data or if I'm loading data into ArcGIS. You'll sort of see this in a future week. For now, let's actually practice on making this an Excel workbook, something that's sort of primed and loaded and meant to work in Excel. And you can always do that. You can always move between the data by saving as. And it's good to sort of practice this because we'll often be saving as one form or another throughout the semester. So take it to wherever you're going to save. Make an Excel workbook as opposed to a CSV. And again, you can always take agency over how you name things. And so I'll call this race and ethnicity data. So next thing is, when you get data like this, you're not stuck with how things look. Remember that every row here is going to depict some type of element, right? In this instance, it's the metropolitan area. So every row is going to be a different metropolitan area, and every column is going to be some piece of information. Well, just visually, right, I have the ability to drag and drop and make any row sort of bigger or smaller. And, I can also do that, with multiple, right? I could select multiple rows and do the same thing. I could select theoretically every row and every column by doing that and moving them back and forth, and everything would move. The other kind of thing here is, we're often getting rows that are effectively hiding some of their information from us, and that often makes sense from a data organization perspective. You don't want to slow down your computer, but if you don't like that, if you want to be able to see any piece of data that's sort of hiding, or any information or any words, you can always select all the rows, again, select all by clicking on the column or the row. And you can find a concept called wrap text. It should be on sort of whatever your main home or formatting is. And it's nice because if I wrap text, make it a little bit bigger, I actually can see all of the text kind of in one line right there. And that's sort of nice for me. It gives me all the information I need. You can make things in the center up here. This is a nice way to sort of make things in the center. And then obviously you can color things up as much as you want them. And I do this for a couple reasons. One, oftentimes you're going to get data from the census that looks like this, and these are sort of codes, and may become more relevant in a couple of weeks when we start putting stuff back into ArcGIS. But for now, you don't really need that. We've sort of downloaded something we intend to use only in Excel, and I can delete stuff, right? So I can come in right in here and sort of delete. And we're also going to do the same thing with our columns, because there's a lot of data here, right? Each one is sort of telling me the effectively sort of the estimate of the percent of the population that is not Hispanic or Latino versus the total, and then the margin and error of each. And we don't really need any of those margin of errors first off, because the margin of errors are good, tell us that it's sort of a sample, but right now, I'm going to just, because the population sizes are so big, try to focus effectively on the estimates. And so, neat thing is by holding sort of command or control, you can actually select multiple rows, right? So I'm selecting anything with margin of error. And if I right click on one of them, I can delete them. Right? In the same way we deleted that row before, I can delete columns, and I can delete them individually, or I can delete them sort of as a large group. So again, I'm just going through and practicing how I can clean up my data. And this seems super basic, but it's also important. I think I often see students in the class access a piece of data, be it geographic or not, and their instinct is, however the data comes to me is how I need to use it. When really you're in charge of sort of cleaning and making a piece of data look how you want it to be. Good. So effectively what we've created here is a series of kind of categories that tell us the total population, and that effectively tell us the part that's not black or Latino or Hispanic. It's white alone, black or African American, so on and so forth. Effectively, I'm really interested in sort of these columns right here. These are what I'm going to use sort of as my primary sort of race and ethnicity categories. Non-Hispanic white, non-Hispanic black, non-Hispanic American Indian, non-Hispanic Asian, non-Hispanic Native Hawaiian, non-Hispanic some other race, non-Hispanic 2 or more races, and then these ones here effectively would add up to that number right here. These are sort of, non-Hispanic 2 or more races, 2 races plus and such, excluding some other race. I'm really just going to delete them because they are subsets of this group right here, and I want to make sure that I'm not sort of double counting them. So effectively, I could keep going on and really sort of get into it by breaking down each of those columns as well, but I'm looking at sort of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 categories here, right? The non-Hispanic white, black, American Indian, Asian, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, some other race, 2 or more races, and Hispanic or Latino. And what we're going to do here is we're actually going to eventually divide them by this category and get a series of sort of percents. And then we're going to use those percents, square them, add them together, and then subtract them from 1. And it gives you this thing called a diversity index. It's nothing that's going to be on a test or anything, but just something interesting to actually have that ultimately helps you answer the question, what percent or what would be sort of the chance if I drew 2 people from random from this geographic area that they would be of different races. So first thing I'm going to do to make life easier is actually store the percent of the population that is each race and ethnicity class. And so I'm going to just select any number of new columns you want to create, and this would be the same with rows. Just select that number, drag and drop. You can right click and do insert. And anytime you do insert, sort of the same way we did delete, it's where I'm adding actual new rows to be able to analyze. And you can type in, percent, NH white, percent NH black, percent, NH AI, American Indian, percent NH Asian, percent NH HPI, Hawaiian Pacific Islander, percent NH other, percent NH2 or more, and then percent in Hispanic or Latino being the final one. So it's just effectively mirroring each of the categories that I have here. One more thing sort of I forgot to do that's kind of helpful. We're going to be scrolling down eventually. Sometimes you don't really want to lose track of where your data is. You can always find under layout, which again might be in a slightly different place for you, this concept of freeze panes. And you can freeze your top row or the first column or pick a place to freeze in general. And effectively what that does is just create that when I'm moving back and forth with my data, that I'm fixed and I don't have to sort of change. So I'll highlight that row, I'll make it bold, and now I'm ready to go. So the cool thing is, this is where we're going to learn sort of our first basic formulas. Hopefully you all know Excel enough to know the concept of formulas, but anytime you hit equal, you're telling it that you're about to calculate something. And as we go through the semester, we'll learn there's all kinds of formulas. You'll see type words, there's sort of reserved words, right? You know, find and replace and, you know, trim and int. These are all functions, some of which we'll learn that will manipulate words and numbers. For now, we're going to do it super simple, and we're just going to calculate our percentages here. So I could take the non-Hispanic white, and I could divide it by the estimate, and there we go. It would be, you know, 63%, at least in the Abilene, Texas metro area, is non-Hispanic white. And the nice thing about Excel is that things are dynamic. So if I right-click, or however you want, and copy that, and then I drag and drop where I want to paste, what I mean by dynamic is you see that it keeps moving. So as I go down, my numbers go down with me, and that ensures that I'm continually getting sort of the relative data point for each to copy the formula. And that's really you know, an awesome way of sort of doing processing. You could go all the way to the bottom, paste, could even come back up and give yourself a percent, you know, switch this to percent so it's easier for you to visualize. And there you go, you have sort of a nice percentage element right there. Now, after having done that though, notice that if I try to do this, it gets insane, right? How on earth would I suddenly have over 2,000,000% of my population be non-Hispanic black? Well, the point is that same idea of dynamism. I said, this instance I went right. And so both of my fields would go right? So I started non-Hispanic black, and that's good. Or sorry, non-Hispanic white. And that's good. When I went right, I wanted it to be black. That lined up. But it also sort of brought the denominator to the right as well. So now I'm dividing it by that percent. So what you effectively need here is you need a way to anchor. And the concept of anchoring can be done with a $sign. So what if I were to come here and put a $sign in front of the D? And what I'm doing there is I'm saying, numerator, N2, you keep moving. If I go down, you go down. If I go across, you go across. Denominator, I didn't touch the 2, right? That's the rows. So if I go down, that's going to go 3, 4, 5. But I anchored the D, meaning that no matter how far I go across, you're not going to leave column D. If I go down, you'll move down with me, but you won't leave column D, meaning I will always divide by the population. And then I can drag and drop it all the way across, and I can see that I've sort of accomplished my goal, right? For 2 or more races, there's 2 or more. I'm dividing the 2 or more races by the same sort of estimated total. And so everything here would be able to add up and ultimately equal 100%. So then you can copy each of those rows. You could take them all the way down, paste, and you'd sort of have exactly what you need right here. Last bit of thing is all about preference. There's some instances where you might want to leave the function live. That's totally fine. There's reason or not to leave a function sort of live, you know, if you're constantly going to be changing your data. But I often find on database style Excel, kind of like what we're doing here, a lot of different rows, a lot of different columns, it slows it down. Every time you sort or sort of filter or do whatever, it's going to make it a little bit more difficult, you know, to load your data. So one thing I like to do when I have live functions is I'll copy them all. So select all the rows from the top or all the columns. I'll go to copy. And then this will look slightly different for you, but the idea is the same. Paste special and do this thing called values. What that means is that it will find whatever the value is here and it will retain it. Notice there's no longer live functions. I now have ultimately my just sort of percentage. So the next thing we'll then do is actually create the diversity index. And I'll go through this sort of slow, but a diversity index, which is a you know, a common function used in biology, but you know, we've also started to use it in demography too. It can be thought of as the probability that I would meet 2 people of a different whatever, right? So it could be race, could be ethnicity, could be age group, could be income class. however you want to structure it. And really all you have to do this is it's simply adding together the squares of each of the percents and then taking that away from 1. So this is going to be a big function, and it's going to look like this. I'll set it up slow. So first thing I'll say is equals 1. 1 is going to minus, and I'm going to make a big parenthesis here, right, to encompass everything else. And it will literally look like this. U squared plus U squared plus U squared plus U squared. Again, I hope you guys see what I'm doing. Plus U, plus U squared. Whoops. You are missing a parenthesis. There you go. Plus U squared plus U 2. So, got all my individual parentheses. I'll close the big parenthesis out. And there you go. So, in Abilene, effectively, you have a 53% chance that you would meet 2 people of sort of different race and ethnic backgrounds. And that is how you would calculate a diversity index right there. So cool tool to be able to have, cool sort of calculation that allows you to quickly visualize a lot of demographic data simultaneously. And then I think more importantly gives you a sense of how you can sort of set up big functions that access multiple fields. So I'm going to pause it for this moment on this video here, and then we'll pick it up on the next one, learning a couple more functions before we close out the class for today.